Good morning, beloved. We are back, episode 059, if I remember correctly. Gentlemen, I've got to apologize. I did not realize we had so many issues with the sound and the soundboard of late. Overton and I did a test stream this morning, and hopefully we have everything clicking and working great. We swapped out everything to new mics. Shouldn't have those problems anymore. So if you could do me a favor, let me know what you think. Contact him, and then we can tweak it and adjust it. Of course, he told me that my sound drops were about 7 times too loud, and we sorted that out. So I think that we are good. So happy Friday. Goodness, man, everything is changing. They're telling us we're going to be up in the 80s, maybe even up in the 90s down in the valley. Incredible. How we went from snow to 90 degrees, that's going to be very difficult, as I said, for a Pacific Northwest man. But everything's changing. All the farmers are out. All of the loggers are out. Everybody's out doing their stuff, and that is also going to happen for us today. So today will be my first project outside, really, in the spring. Members, we're going to be doing content or a stream for you. We're going to be doing field burning. This is the first time I've ever done it, and I noticed that my neighbors were doing it. They're burning out their fence lines, and I figured, well, if they can do it, then I can do it too, right? How hard can it be? So that will be available for members directly after the live stream. We're going to go out there and get after it. My manservant Jariah and I got all the gear together. We had the fire skid all winterized. We got everything's out ready to go. So I'm actually going to I'm looking forward to that very much. It's going to be a fun project. We were talking. Mrs. W and I were talking, man, our fence lines are looking terrible. How are we going to deal with that? Are we going to go there and like physically pull everything out? And I thought, well, I could get out there with the excavator and I could pull all the grass and the dirt. Well, then I saw my neighbor, how it's done properly, and they set it all on fire. So that's what I'm going to do as well. All right, let us get to it and we'll get started. Goodness, who's been watching the whole Steven Crowder debacle? That is a slow drip of bad news for Mr. Crowder. You know, have you ever had someone that you never really gave you a reason to believe, or not to like them or to think something was amiss, but you just felt it in your spirit? Yeah, there's a few people like that, and this is just my personal opinion. I'm not making any accusations on anyone, but a couple of guys that really have just gave me the heebies personally. One is Mr. Beast. I don't know. He does a lot of good. I don't know and this isn't sour grapes, let's not go there. It's just that when I look at him, I can't tell if it's the mustache that puts me off or there's just something off. You just kind of know in the spirit. Sometimes when you have that sense of feeling towards people, it's usually not very long before something comes out. And I've always had the same thing with Steven Crowder. Of course, he seems to be one of the good guys on the right side of history. But man, when I watched that ring footage of the way that he behaved and the way that he treated his 8-month pregnant wife, that was very eye-opening, very, very eye-opening. And I fear that his days may be over from that. All right, speaking of days being over, I run the risk daily of my life being over with the lighting of the attempted lighting of this infernal lantern. We are going to move forward today. I brought a flashlight with us so that we're not completely in the dark here. Now, I got to focus. We have fuel. Yeah. Let's leave sleeping dogs lie. I don't know that we need to have any more spillage this morning. We'll go with what we have. Looks like we got a half a tank. This is in orders of magnitude more dangerous than any field burning could ever be. 20 pumps. Oh man. So I was wondering what the best way to start the field on fire is, and I think we'll just go with the old drip torch. I got a new batch of drip torch fluid mixed up. Of course, I should focus on what I'm doing here and not get distracted. Of course, when you are making drip torch fuel, 75% diesel, 25% gas. So, I thought I'd start off. Oh. Let's see. 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 Let's Every time it gets, I have to start off and share a story with you that happened, well, towards the end of last year. I'm in deep trouble with my local fire. I got in deep trouble with my local fire chief, and I'll tell you what happened. And I'm hoping that he's not going to be coming around here this afternoon. So what happened last year, I was about to share this story with Mr. Overton on our phone call this morning, and he stopped me and said, wait, you got to share this with the group. So we're going to do it here together. Last year, towards the end of summer, it was getting cool, humidity was coming up, and that's always a good time to burn your trash, not your trash, burn your brush and that sort of thing. So we have a small piece of land, a commercial lot that's actually real close to the fire station. And I went over there with my excavator and the equipment, and we brushed everything up, took a bunch of the small trees out, the dead and dying, and really just cleaned things up and just made it look real nice, like a park. Well, I had a big pile of debris, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, I'll just burn this, rather than trying to haul it off or chip it. So I sat around there for a couple hours. I got a good old fire going. It wasn't too big, maybe 20 foot in diameter. But if you're a professional homeowner, you can manage a 20 foot in diameter fire, right? Well, I watched it, and it was kind of going down, and what certainly wasn't out, but it was definitely, it was laying down for sure. Well, Jack had a soccer game that was about, maybe a mile away or so, so I took off and figured, I'll go down there and watch a soccer game for an hour or so, and I'll come back, and then I'll put some water on it, spray it, put it out, or dig around it, whatever. Well, I was gone maybe a little bit longer than 2 hours. Maybe it's more like 2 hours. And I came back, and the fire had been completely put out. I could see a whole bunch of boot marks around there where several volunteer firemen had responded to this and dragged their hoses over and sprayed out my fire. And there was a note on my excavator that said, "We need to talk, the chief." So I got back home, and I thought, well, I'll call the chief in the morning. Called him one time, called him 2 times, called him 3 times, and I never got an answer. So I quit calling, and I haven't spoke to him since. So I'm hoping that there isn't too much bad blood. And it was funny that this, after all of that, and we need to talk note, I was driving by after we had that last big snow. Well, the fire department, they have a huge parking lot, around there, and it gathers up a lot of snow, and then the building is massive as well, so the roof sheds on there, so they have a lot of snow to deal with, right? And not a whole lot of places to put it, apart from in other people's land. So I noticed that they had pushed all of the snow for the entire lot of the fire department off of their space right onto my lot, my property. And it was a huge mountain of snow, which it doesn't matter to me because we're not using it for anything right now. And if they want to store the snow on there, I'm perfectly cool with that. But I did there was a little mean streak that came up in my mind, and I was very, very tempted to write the same note, "We need to talk," and place it on the door of the fire station. But I'm not going to do that. So, sorry, gentlemen. That is where we are. Okay, let's get going here. How's the audio? I haven't checked there in the chat. Are we looking good? We'll get this dialed in. I apologize for this poor production. There's a learning curve to all these things, and you'd think after almost 60 episodes that we'd have it all sorted out, but you know how it is. I have to kind of tear this live stream set down every day because I need the room in the shop, so I'm always kind of putting it back up, and I get things wrong. So once we get over, maybe we'll get down to the new tent when we get that set up, and we'll just kind of leave things in place, and we won't have all these problems. Have you guys been following the Steven Crowder deal? What do you think about all that? Yeah, I think his career is over as well. All right, let me open this up here. Okay, looks like Overton's telling me that we have good audio, good levels, everything is fine, perfectly good. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so what we're going to do this afternoon, so what I'm thinking, do any of you guys, I'll have a question, ask you a question. Have any of you guys ever done field burning before or fence burning? I was kind of surprised. My neighbor, who's got just to the west of me, they run cattle. And I noticed that their fields look completely different than mine, primarily around the fence posts. And what's going on with my fence posts is we've got to go in there this summer, Jariah and I, and rebuild and rework a bunch of the fences because Mrs. W is pretty keen to get to run a cow or two, maybe 2 or 3, not too many, but we're thinking about maybe getting into just dipping our toe into it and getting into running our own cattle so that we can have our own beef, or at least finishing. So that means we're going to have to do a bunch of fence work. Now, I've never built fences before, and the ones that we have now, I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10 are probably the condition, I would say maybe like a 6 or a 7. So there's some fence posts that need to be replaced. A lot of the wires have been broken or cut or bent, or it just looks kind of shabby. So I was looking at this fence, and it's all grown up with brush. You know, we have the field where we hayed our field for the first time last year. And so I irrigate that, and I keep that really nice, and I put a lot of work into that. I really enjoyed that. But one thing that's been kind of upsetting to me is just the condition of the fence line. I think it just looks shabby. It just looks shabby and reflects poorly on me. So I've wanted to do something about it. But the big issue I've had is I can't even hardly get to the fence. There's so much brush and grass and bushes and everything that's grown up into it. And you're talking, miles of this stuff. So how does a guy go about dealing with that? And we thought, well, do we go in there and just try to get in there and pull it all out with the excavator? Well, in doing that, I tried that a little bit last year, and I ended up only just, brush and stuff would grab onto the post, and I was pulling and breaking fence. It was just having a terrible time. Mrs. W thought, well, we could send Jariah over there with a weed trimmer. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. He'd be out there. It'd be like a full-time job. It'd be like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, trying to deal with this with a weed trimmer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to light that whole thing on fire. And that's the plan, what we're going to do next. The next phase. All right, looking good. We have a member message from, I don't know who that's from. Is that from Overton? Mr. Overton, thank you, brother, who writes, that Ring camera video means someone released it. To tell a story, one side of a story, I still get the creeps with Crowder, but missing context. That's my main concern with that as well. That's very curious that a Ring camera, it's not like that's public access. Someone had to release that. And judging from the way that it made him look, I'm guessing it was not him. So that's kind of a tricky and insidious thing to do. But it's almost fair with Crowder, because Crowder, just last month or so, he got into a little bit of a hot water because he was secretly recording people's conversations and then trying to make people look bad, or trying to make himself look better in his negotiating for a contract. And that all blew up in his face. So I don't feel too bad about this being released and seeing behind the scenes, but just like Overton said, yeah, that's true. You can, if there's hours and hours of footage and you just cherry pick, hand select one piece that makes you look particularly bad, that is suspect as well. So I think that's important to say. Anyone who's been in a long-term relationship, you're going to have those moments. There's times where you've had discussions or arguments or fights with your wife that you wouldn't want to be put out in public, right? And without the proper context of what brought it to that point and what the buildup was, it's really hard to get a real story. But when you see a guy like that, it hits kind of hard, because he's always been on the forefront of Matrad Khan values, right, and traditional values, and he's been very public about his faith in God and his Christianity, and so you kind of hold guys to a little bit higher standard if they're gonna go publicly with this, especially being so judgmental about the culture and so judgmental about other people, and then when you find yourself in that position and the cameras are on and no one's watching, and the way that he conducted himself, it just doesn't make any sense. And why would a guy that's worth, what's his net value? I've heard $10 million, $20 million. Why would a guy in that situation only have one car? And I don't know. It seems very weird. We'll see. We'll see. But it just comes to show, man, that people are not stupid. And even if you try to carefully curtail your life, or not curtail, what's the word? Curate your life and build an online persona like he has done, you just can't do it forever. The truth always seems to come out, and there's just no hiding from it. If the way you treat people, the way you treat your wife and your family, even if it's behind closed doors, if you're a public figure like that, it's eventually going to come out, and just kind of the way it is. You can't hide that sort of thing. You can't hide your true character. So that's it sucks for him, man. I don't know he's ever going to be able to recover from that. We have a super chat or a new member by the Pineapple guy. Welcome, shout out to you. And the live chat new member, just unsubbed from Crowder. Just disgusting. He'd treat his wife like that. Yeah, it didn't make sense for me. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch it. It's the two of them arguing outside on their lawn furniture. And the argument seems to stem from, she is obviously very pregnant, probably about 7 or 8 months pregnant, and she wants to go to the store to get groceries for the family. He's sitting there and he's throwing a baby fit because he wants the car. He doesn't want her to take the car. And if she takes the car, then he can't go to the gym and he can't hang out with his friends and he can't go see his family. And he's very much in a passion making this argument. And the one that seems very reasonable in this whole discussion is her. She seems very polite. She seems very submissive. She's trying to reason with a very unreasonable person, and he's just not having it. And just from the voice inflections and everything, you could just see a lot of the character of Mr. Crowder, of the transaction between the two. He actually is the one that acts like he's the feminine one, really caught up in his emotions, and she seems to be the one that's reasonable. Again, I don't know the context, but I think if I was in that situation, and I have been in that situation, being someone that's been married for a significant amount of time, when Mrs. W, I'll tell you my whole take on the thing, like how I conducted myself and how I viewed it, having a man with a pregnant woman in the house. If I would have been in that situation, and I was in that situation many times without the fighting, if Mrs. W wanted something, especially at that point, it was my mission to make that happen. I understood what she was going through. At 8, 9 months pregnant, that's a difficult time for a woman. And a man should understand that she's also going to be at the height of emotion. There's a lot of things going on, and things that maybe wouldn't affected her in the past are going to have a tremendous effect on her now. And what she's doing it's a big job, what she's doing. I looked at it was anything that I could do to make her life a little bit easier, to make sure she had zero stress, that she wasn't getting in a big stressful argument or fight, releasing cortisol or cortisone or whatever it is, which has a negative effect on the immune system, etc., and the baby. All of the anxiety, fear, and stress of a woman, in my opinion, from what I understand, that affects the child that's in the womb. And if a woman can be kept within reason, comfortable, and she feels secure, and she feels like she has a safe home, and she has a man that's going to look after her and take care of her in this vulnerable state, I think it helps out the pregnancy, and I certainly think it helps out just the whole process. So to be in that environment with your wife that is pregnant with twins at 8 months and throwing a baby fit over a car like that, and causing all the stress and aggravation for really no reason, especially when you have those sorts of resources. I mean, is it asking too much to get another car? If you're worth $10 or $20 million, could you not have maybe the groceries delivered, or maybe even a driver? And, to be honest with you, had I been in that situation, I wouldn't have been comfortable with my wife getting in a car at 8 or 9 months, especially today in these conditions, going to a grocery store in public, especially someone having such a big public persona. I mean, Steven Crowder is a very famous person. and I'm sure his wife is easily recognized as well in public. And to send my wife out unattended in that condition would just be unthinkable. I would have done, I think most Proho would have done one or two things. One, you would either volunteered, hey baby, I'll go get the groceries. I'll go get them and you stay here and I'll take care of that. Maybe she just wanted to get out. I get that too. You get housebound sometime and you want to just get out and see some people and just have a little bit different environment around you. If that was the case, I would have driven her. But there's no way, absolutely no way at that condition would I send her out in public without me going with her to help her, to look after her. And the fact that he he told her to go get an Uber. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your wife pregnant with twins at 8 months? Because you may have use of a car or may need the car.
Okay, White, the nanoleaf bulb one is not responding.
I don't know what's going on here. People say I'm paranoid, but when I see all this stuff turning on and turning off, sometimes I wonder, who's got control of the network? It's the AI bot. But that's just my take on it. What do you guys think? Do you think you'll ever be able to recover from this? Can you blame her for leaving the guy? I think what it is that I've always kind of felt about Crowder, and I've watched a fair amount of his stuff and how he used to do the change my mind stuff at the college campuses. I've always got the impression that he was in my opinion, that he was closeted homosexual. You know, I don't know if that's the case or not. Time will tell and we will see, but it kind of stands to reason. There's guys that, you know, once you put on this persona that I'm the trad con guy, I'm the hardcore conservative guy, traditional values, traditional marriage, you know, doing everything right, you know, being an example for everyone. Once you lock yourself into that position, you know, I've known guys that were too afraid to come out and admit what they really were, you know, what their sexual persuasion was, and they thought if they could just hide it and if they could just play the role of a normal man, normal family guy, that maybe that would, I don't know, who knows. But I've always kind of got that impression just from his flamboyant nature, the way he speaks, he seems to really like to dress up a lot in skits and such. And I know there's skits and acting, but you know, it kind of looks that way sometimes, wouldn't you think? All right, gentlemen, let's see. We have a super chat here, our new member chat from Phoenix Bird. Welcome, Phoenix Bird. And Phoenix Bird says, just unsubbed from Crowder. Yeah, I already read that. John Doden. Welcome, John. John says, can't watch Crowder's show with all the clips of undressed women he airs. I haven't watched his stuff for a long time. It's been several years since I've watched any of his things. I see him come up a little bit on shorts and different things. But yeah, I don't know, man. It just kind of, he portrays himself to be kind of the alpha Chad in the room and the dominant guy. And I wonder if it's not a lot of overcompensation. And being such a control freak and trying to control everything, I don't know, man. It's just not looking good. But I've always kind of suspected. Again, I don't have any proof of this. This is just my opinion, but I've always wondered if he wasn't a closeted homosexual. Mr. Jason Tejas, new member. Shout out to you. Welcome, brother. I hope to see you over in the field burning. I don't know. I'm going to try to do a live stream for you guys if I can, if I have enough internet. If not, we'll just shoot some normal content. But it's going to be a good time over there. Mr. Austin Fitterer. He says, I watch Crowder, but everyone on set is a yes man. You can tell it's constant fake laughing. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And another thing that's kind of concerning is that there's some guys that have worked for him in the past, and he's pretty heavy-handed with the NDA, non-disclosure agreements. And so there's folks out there that have broke or been fired or let go for various reasons who know what's going on and kind of knew his personality and what was taking place behind the scenes and about the yes man. I've heard that as well, and how he acted, and they've not been able to say anything because of these NDAs. And my question would be, if you're operating in a way where all of your former employees have to sign no disclosure agreements, what does that say about your character? I mean, I've worked for a lot of guys, I've had a lot of guys work for me. I've never once ever had to consider or even thought about having them sign an NDA out of fear of exposing me for something. That's very suspect in itself as well. But I like to see it, man. I love to see whether they're left-wing or right-wing grifters. I like to see them being exposed for the charlatans they are, if that turns out to be the case. And again, like Overton said, this was a clip released by one side that made him look particularly bad. Was this a one-off? Does he treat his wife this way all the time? Or was this just, I don't know. I don't know, but it doesn't look good. We have a super chat from Mr. Dave Knott. Shout out to you, Dave. Welcome. Dave says, 37 male, boys 6 and 3, Colombian wife, 13 years. Prayers answered with yesterday's with clarifying TradCon. Curious if we can create a network with skills among. Yeah, creating a network. How do you do that? Sharing these skills. I think what he's talking about here, like we spoke of, a week or two ago, how sad it is to have these guys around that are retired. Let's say you work in the trades, carpenter, electrician, plumber, roofer, logger, whatever. You guys know that have worked in any trade for a certain amount of time, you get really, really good at it, especially if you dedicate a lifetime to it. And the work that you can accomplish and the quality of work that you can accomplish now after 30, 40 years of experience of something, in the past would have taken you a long time. Just those subtle little tips and tricks and how to hold things and to know this and know that, just that little insider information, the trade secrets as they used to call it, make all the difference in the world between success and failure. When you have the amount of time, money, and effort that goes into developing and building this experience, this lifetime of experience, whatever you're doing, is so, so valuable. And it's so tragic for a man that spends a lifetime doing something to take that knowledge with him to the grave, that's not being passed on to the collective. If there was a way to pair up these older men that are just sitting around dying, they've got nothing better to do, they don't work anymore, they're retired, but they still possess all of this incredible wealth of knowledge. The question is, the trick is how do you pair these guys with young guys that are trying to get started, that they could help them? In the past, this was all handed down. It was handed down from family to family. And I've told this story before, but what's such a bad deal with our particular situation here. When we were in Sweden years ago, we went out to the Mora province. It's out in the country around the lake, a beautiful area. And when we were traveling through there and visiting and talking with people, one thing that really surprised me is I would see these guys that were in their 20s and 30s and had these amazing, beautiful farms with beautiful pieces of land, multiple buildings, big acreage. They'd have places where they were growing fruit. They had places their gardens. They had places where they were growing their crop. They even had a forestry section. They had animals, brand new tractors, brand new equipment. And I talked to these guys and kept seeing them, and I thought, goodness, how in the world could you possibly how does a guy get started like that? Because us at the time, we were right in the midst of it, where we would sold everything we had and even had to borrow money to buy our homestead, the one that we left from, and trying to get that going. And I didn't have anything. Mrs. W and I were out trying to clear all the brush by hand with chainsaws and hand saws. And as I said yesterday, the first tractor we got was a riding lawnmower, and we put a trailer on that and used that, and just kept building, and finally got a wood splitter. And it was a lot of effort to build up the infrastructure and everything just so you could start working. And when I went to Sweden and I saw these guys that were 10 years younger than me and that were so established, it was like, what's the deal here? I've been taught that America's the best country and we have all these opportunities and it's easier to get a start here than anywhere else. But I see all these dudes here that are they're going great, man. They're in their 20s and 30s and they're just killing it. Well, what Mrs. W told me was like, because they passed the knowledge down. This guy has probably been on this piece of land for how long? is it 5, 6, 10 generations? And his great-great-grandfather built a barn, and his grandfather, everyone built something, or built road or fence or infrastructure or dug a well or a pond that contributed to the greater good, and passed that forward on to the next generation. So when a young guy takes the reins over something like that, he has all of the effort of his entire family, his fathers and grandfathers that have all worked to give the next generation something better than they had, to leave the land a little bit better, and to perpetuate the family that way. What a beautiful thing that is. And it's not just material goods that we're talking about, it's also the knowledge. His grandfather has been on the land his whole life, 90 years. You think he learned a thing or two about how to farm, how to garden, what the animals like, what's the best way to log, what's the best way to do this, what's the best crop. Is he not passing that on from father to son, on and on and on? And that's a way for a guy to get started. That's really the way things should be, but we don't have that. I don't know why, if it was why there was a break in this tradition, because when I go back to my grandfather, it was very much the same way. The great-grandfather, grandfather, and my granddad all lived in the same homestead together, and they passed on that knowledge, and they worked together, and that was just the way it was done. It was when the boomer generation, maybe it was the Industrial Revolution or the age, whatever it was, but it really got us away from that, and families no longer live together, and now you grow up, and where was that knowledge? Where was that transfer of knowledge? If it hadn't have been, sorry, I got a runny nose here. If it wouldn't have been for the effort and time that my grandfather put in with me, teaching me those things that he learned, because he continued that tradition, where my father, it like skipped a generation. My dad, that wasn't something that he did. I worked with him, and we did things together, but he didn't take the time and spend the effort that my grandfather did. It just seemed that I was kind of just on my own, and I remember when I got out of high school, graduated high school, that point in a young man's life, you're kind of trying to figure out what to do, and you could really use some guidance from your elders, fathers, grandfathers, and such. And I remember graduating high school and kind of wondering, what do I do now? And my dad just said, so what are you going to do? He gave me a couple of ideas, but I basically went out into the world and had to start over from scratch and was completely on my own. And eventually, when I did get my land, I didn't have anyone to help me. I had bare land, and I had no knowledge, I had no equipment, no materials, nothing. And the learning process starts, and you reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. And that's just never a way to get ahead. For my generation, and a lot of people can relate, the reason why we detest the boomers so much, so many of them, not all, is because they didn't prepare us they never made us a priority, our children, or it didn't seem to be. The priority wasn't made there. They didn't give us anything to get started in life, land and materials. They seem to consume and keep everything themselves, and are still doing it. And we're just hands off and turned us loose, and we're here we are out in the world. So to answer the question about, it would be nice to have a way to network the old guys with the young guys, I agree. I just don't know what that is. That really is the driving force behind why Mrs. W and I are working so hard to get this land here set up in a way where we can have folks come and we can share this knowledge. And I'm not so arrogant to say that I have all this knowledge to impute on people. I don't. I know a few things. I've learned a lot of things from mistakes that I've made. I learned a lot from my grandfather. I had the fortune of being raised by two really capable guys. But I don't have to know everything. We can bring everything in together. For me, a lot of it, I don't necessarily need to know how to do something to get motivated and to get started. I need to just see someone doing it. If I can see someone doing it and that they've been successful at it and they've created the life that they want, that in itself is encouraging to me. So the main goal here for us, within 12 to 18 months is what we're hoping, Lord willing, is that we'll have a facility and a place where we can start doing that. We can start building that network where folks can come and couples can come and we can learn these things together. And as important as that is going to be just having the encouragement and seeing that someone is doing it. When you can come to their house and see it being done, then when you leave there, you're going to be really fired up to do that. So I hear you. I don't have an answer. This is our small way of what we can do. We've always tried to share that on the YouTube channel by how-to stuff and sharing our experiences as real as possible. That's always been a way, but as much as I enjoy doing that, the next phase, or I guess, or the last phase of my YouTube career, I would like to have, rather than doing so much remotely, I'd like to have where we could get together and learn. We could do a class on how to sharpen crosscut saws. We can bring experts in for timber framing, have these groups and such. So that's what we're building and that's what we're working towards. So be patient. We're running as fast as we can. Thank you, brother. And if I was going to rate your proho, Mr. David, 37, 2 boys, 6 and 3, a Colombian wife, probably a trad con, 13 years. Yeah, I don't have much to go on, but I'm going to give you a good 7.5. How about that? Mr. Anprim Paul, shout out to you. Welcome. Good to have you here. He says, even though I'm a leftist and an atheist, I still enjoy watching you. Act accordingly. Yeah. No, I'm somewhat surprised. I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm somewhat surprised. I hear comments just like this all the time and always have, and from Paul, about men that are not people of faith, maybe atheist, agnostic, that say, hey, I don't always agree with this stuff. This maybe isn't for me. But I appreciate the fact that I feel welcome here. I feel like I'm not being judged. And I don't judge you whatsoever. Again, I'll say it over and over again. I would have more respect for a man that put his time in and searched the scriptures, looked into it himself, and then came away and said, no, this isn't for me, or I don't think this is true, but had done the work, than someone that is like a Steven Crowder, pretending to be a Christian, but not showing it in their works. I don't have any issue with anyone that hasn't come to the truth or hasn't come to the knowledge that I have. I get that. I used to be that person, and there's nothing worse than a Bible-thumping, sanctimonious so-called Christian. Paul tells us, Paul was the greatest evangelist of all time. He wrote the majority of the New Testament. And the way he said it, I repeat it all the time. It's one of my favorite scriptures. Let every man be convinced in his own mind. We don't need to go bend people's ears. We don't need to, twist their arms. We don't need to compel them into doing something. Free will, it's clearly understood through God's interactions with men throughout time and history that free will is of paramount importance to him. It's everything. And he's not going to force you to do something against your will. If you make that decision, you'll make it on your own. So we're all learning. None of us here have the answers. The atheist, can't be so proud to think that I know the way, I know the truth. Atheism takes faith as well. There's a lot of things that are unproven. There's a lot of things that are speculated, that are the less informed take that as truth and just run with it. But a true atheist will know, if he's done the research, that there are a lot of things that are not understood. And it could be highly probable that there is intelligent design and that there is a mastermind behind all of this. Only a fool could say that there wasn't. So that's not a problem here. We're glad to have you, Paul, and nothing else needs to be said. I appreciate you being here. Mr. Dustin Fleener, our newest member. Hope to see you over on The Burning. And goodness, we have a super chat from Mr. Joe Dudge, $50. Goodness, we got to get a sound drop for that. Thank you, brother. I sure do appreciate that. Joe says, been watching for a while. Your content helped me at quite a few sticky situations. On Crowder, I stay away for personal reasons, but you keep being a professional homeowner. Your advice saved me in more ways than one. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, boy, I do. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's so generous of you, Mr. Joe. Jimothy, We have a super chat. Jimothy writes, why did you give the cheapest machete such a hard time? LOL. As a young man, you've been an inspiration to me for a long time. God bless. I did, back in the old homestead, I did a video on how much I detest machetes. When we were clearing the forest, I got no small number of guys that would ring in, and we were struggling with all of the brush and everything and trying all sorts of different tools, from weed whippers with skill saw blades on it to chainsaws to Japanese tools, all sorts of things. And every single time, guys would be like, oh, all you need is a machete. You just get yourself a machete and your problems will be solved. I'll tell you about, I got my granddad's machete and I cut down an oak tree with this thing, et cetera, et cetera. I knew better, but I bought one anyway just to silence them. And I took that thing out there and went to work on that woody, brushy stuff, Pacific Northwest brush, vine maples and Oregon berry and ponderosa pine and all that, and it was absolutely useless. It was useless, which you wouldn't think it would be. You see the machete, but where you see the machete being really functional is when you get into more of a, maybe of a jungle environment, someplace where you don't have like really woody, fibrous type of bushes and brush. You have things more like, I don't know, things that have more moisture in them. And you see those guys hacking and cutting, and they're just going through there with one hand with their machete, and they're cutting trail through the jungle, and it just looks like the ultimate tool. Carving through the jungle like a lightsaber, right? Well, not so much over here. It's absolutely useless. So I did a video review on it, and I may have went a little bit hard on that because I was a little bit worn out from all of the folks telling me that if only I had a machete, all my problems would have been over. And I assure you that they were not. So not a fan of the machete. It has no value to Proho whatsoever. Thank you, Jimothy, though. I appreciate that. Mr. Overton Windex, we have a super chat. He says, I've tried getting in unpaid apprenticeships with dozens of small shops and trades. Free seems to be too expensive. They can't take a risk with a liability. Now, I'm not really clear on that. What are you saying? So I've tried getting in unpaid apprenticeships with dozens of small shops and trades. Free seems to be too expensive. They can't take the risk. I think what Overton's bringing up here is that one of the pieces of advice is that a lot of guys will give you, and I will give you the same, is that if you want to go to work for a company and they're unwilling to take a risk on you because of what have you. In the past, I've had success with this. I've known a lot of dudes that have got the job that they wanted by going up to the owner and say, I'll work for you for free. I want a job, you're hiring, and if you don't like me, you don't have to pay me, but if you do like me and you see my work ethic, then you can give me a job. I'm willing to do that, whatever it takes. I don't know that particular situation. Small shops, liability, yeah, I could see that. Things are different than they used to be. You could show up. I'll tell you that one of the best stories I ever heard of a guy taking initiative was my old neighbor, Hank. Many of you guys remember Henry. He was in the original videos a long time ago. He was probably in his 80s or so. He was born in a family that was from Switzerland, but they lived in Oregon. And he didn't even know how to speak English when he went into school, running around speaking Swiss with his family. They were so poor. Henry's family, they had a bunch of kids in this family, and his father worked in the, if I remember right, worked in the woods as a logger. And his mother, well, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I'm sure this was a long time ago, it won't matter anymore. His mother helped support the family in the family home by running, can I say this? I don't think the family would be upset with me. Well, she made moonshine. They had a little dirt floor in a basement, and she had a little still that ran down there. Now, she would run this, and she had, I think this was probably, must have been in the 20s or so it could have been during Prohibition when there wasn't any alcohol or bars allowed. I don't know if it was that or if it was just an underground bar. But what she did is she would run this high-test moonshine, essentially, and the guys after work would come over and she would sell set up drinks for a nickel a shot. And the guys from the woods and the loggers would come down there and they would drink there. It was just a common thing, nickel a shot, and that's how she helped subsidize the family and bring a little bit extra income in. Henry told me she was a pretty hard working woman and had so many kids running around there. She didn't have time, to look after them all maybe as well as she could have, and babysitters and childcare, just didn't happen in this day. And what she would do sometimes was when she was running the moonshine still, Henry would say that all those little kids would be down there, and she would say, "You can stick your finger in it, but no cups." So what he's talking about is as you put the mash in they had a big copper pot. Put the mash in the pot and it had a little nozzle come out the top, and then they'd heat it with a wood stove or a wood fire. And as you'd heat up this mash that was fermenting, the steam would come out the top, and that's where the alcohol is, right? And that would come in, it would go in through a small tube with the water jacket deal that they had. And then in the cooling of that condenser, they'd cool it, it would turn into a liquid, and the straight moonshine is running out the other end where she's bottling it, right? So it's dribbling out like a faucet that's just barely turned on. It's dribbling out. Well, what she was talking about is that the kids would go over there, and they realized at a young age that it was quite enjoyable to drink a little bit of this. So when it was running, she would let them stick their fingers in it and lick their fingers. Whatever they could get off of that was theirs to keep, but no cups. They couldn't hold a cup underneath of it. Now, I don't know how old these kids were, but I got the impression that they were quite small. Henry said that in about a half hour or so, there'd be a dozen or so little kids all quietly asleep on the dirt floor in the basement, so his mother could get to work with the making of the moonshine. I don't know why I'm sharing this story if I was supposed to, but it was a good one. I don't know why I shared that. Oh, Henry. So this is Henry's upbringing. So what he did, so when he was a young man at 16, I have so many great stories that Henry shared with me. When I had my Jeep parts business, he was one of those guys that I'm talking about, an incredibly brilliant machinist. He never learned to read. I think he left school in like the 3rd or 5th grade, 4th grade, really young. The teacher just got so frustrated with him that this was a one-room schoolhouse, almost 100 years ago. She just basically said, I don't want you here anymore, just stay home. So he never went to school again. So he never learned to read. He learned English. His English was perfect, but he never learned to read. So what was incredible about Henry was that he had nothing going on. He had no way to get a job. He had no way to get, he just didn't have an education, anything. He had to really make his way in life just by his wits. And he told me the story of how he got his first car. He went up to a guy that he got his first car and his first job. He went up to a guy that owned a wildcat logging shop, just a small logging shop with maybe a couple dozen guys. This would have been in the days probably before chainsaws. So they were logging with crosscut saws and axes. He wanted a job. He wanted to work as a mechanic. He was pretty good mechanically, pretty good working on cars. So he went up to this guy and he realized that there was an old truck that was out in the berry bushes that had been sitting out there for years, not running. It quit running and someone drug it out there and there it sat. Henry, and he was pretty young at this time, I'm guessing probably 15 or 16, somewhere around there. He went up to the owner of the shop and he said, "Let me make you a deal. If I can get that truck running, will you give me a job?" The guy said, "Well, yeah, we tried. It's been out there for a long time. We could use it, but nobody's ever been able to figure it out." And so there it sat. So that's what Henry did. And I don't remember all the details of the story. This was close to 20 years ago, he told me, just the gist of it. But he went there on his own time, and he took that whole thing apart and rebuilt that engine or whatever it was that was wrong and got that thing going. And so shocked the guy that he was working for that he got a job with him and worked for him for a long time. That's the type of initiative that we're talking about. Would you hire a guy that did that? I would. There's no risk to the employer. is just win-win. A guy that's got that sort of talent and that sort of drive and ambition that can go out there and do that and stick to it and get the job done, that's a valuable man. That would make a good employee, and any wise employer would see that. Today, like Overton was saying, offering to do it for free, offering to go to a shop to do that, it's understandable why that wouldn't work anymore. Now that I think about it, liability. If you as an employer, could you get into a problem or get yourself in a bind if a young person came there and was working for you and you have no insurance on them, you're not really paying them, even though they agreed to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can see why some employers would be reluctant to do that. I can't speak for everyone, but it does make sense. It wouldn't surprise me. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. What I'm hearing from the guys that I know that own construction companies and such, there's a real big desire right now for skilled trades. If you show up, you don't need to do that, I think, to be honest with you. I don't know that you need to work for free or do that anymore. I think if you show up and just present yourself correctly and offer yourself, to work and be a reliable employee, I think a lot of guys would take a chance on you right now, because it's just so hard to find people that are not entitled. It's amazing. I'm hearing back from people that are telling me that they're having young people, especially young people, come in for job interviews for really good jobs, jobs that are starting at like $25 an hour, and they'll teach you, and then that will quickly scale up $35-40 an hour. That's pretty decent if you're a young guy. Every opportunity, company vehicles even, and benefits and such, anything to lure quality people in. Guys are just dying out here trying to find quality people. They don't even care if you're skilled or not. The thing that I hear is if someone shows up and they have a valid driver's license and they show up on time and they don't call in sick on Mondays and Fridays, we would move the earth for them just to get them set up and get them going. What they're telling me is that they can't even get past the interview. If they even show up to the interview, they're showing up late. When they ask questions, you have any questions about this company? The only interest that the person has is what they can get out of it. How much are you going to pay me? I don't work on weekends. I don't work on Fridays. They have all these demands. I mean, can you imagine going into a job interview with demands? That just is unbelievable to me. Maybe that's the better way. I have watched the tradesmen, especially working in the construction trades, and I've worked in factories, and really guys get taken advantage of, in my opinion. I don't think they get paid enough for what they do, especially the guys that do dangerous work. So I like to see a little bit of that. It's nice to have a little bit of bargaining when you go in, and it's good to see wages go up and such, but I don't know what the future is. It's just not going to look good. There just is a different work ethic, and I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. It's going to change our life radically. Change, we automatically assume that change is going to be bad. When we have less to choose from at the grocery store, when we have less choice in equipment and tools, and the variety of things, our generation, we reach peak variety. If you were to walk into a grocery store pre-COVID, like an American big grocery store, just the number of choices and selections is absolutely breathtaking. If you have grown up with that, you won't know what I'm talking about, and have never seen anything else or never left the country. But when you go over to poorer countries, like when we went over to Eastern Europe and Prague and some of the areas that are not as wealthy as the U.S. was at that time, their choices were very, very limited. They didn't have the choices of vehicles and cars and equipment and tools. It is just not even close. So us coming from that and being used to that, going into the new world where that's going to be seriously curtailed, it's going to have to be, because there's not going to be near as many companies producing. There's not going to be as many workers willing to put that amount of time in and make their work or their job or their vocation the most important thing in their life. The younger people, they want something different. They don't want the life that they're watching of their boomer grandparents or parents, at 70, 75 and still working with a reverse mortgage. They just don't want that. So they're taking a hard look at, and they're prioritizing leisure time or the ability to do what they want to do over the just being a worker bee. So that's not necessarily the solution either, but just because we're moving in that direction doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I don't know what the solution is. Rye, the pineapple guy, a new member, shout out to you, says, Mr. W, I'm an EMT now and unsure if I should pursue medic. I want a homestead, but my fiance is very close to her family and unwilling East Coast man. An unwilling East Coast man. No, I've worked in that field, and it's worse now than it used to be. If you're talking about being an EMT, what are your options? So it's not difficult to become an EMT. You can go to community college, take a couple semesters, providing you got your prerequisites, and you can get your EMT basic, start with that. Once you start with that, you can actually get a job on a car or an ambulance, as they call them. A lot of the ambulances now, well, in the past, we always had 2 paramedics, but I see now because of staffing issues and just problems, I'm seeing some cars with EMT basics as well as a paramedic. Now, EMT, it breaks down roughly into these 2 categories. The basic is going to give you basic first aid. What you're going to be able to do is not a whole lot, to be honest. I mean, maybe no frontline cardiac drugs or anything, but you're going to have basic wound care, and you're going to know how to hold C-spine, and you're going to know how to put someone on a stretcher in the back of a car. You're not going to have a whole lot of, maybe stop bleeding, that sort of thing, but you're not going to be doing anything invasive. You're not intubating. You might do defibrillator with EMT basic, but it's pretty limited. Typically, you're going to operate under the guidance of a paramedic. Now, EMT paramedic, that's a whole nother deal. That's much more advanced. You're going to be pushing frontline cardiac drugs. You're going to be doing IVs. You're going to be doing intubations, a lot of medications, a lot of special education. And to get that, you're going to have to spend, probably from start to finish, better part of a year and a half, maybe even 2 years to do that. Now, and it's not easy. It's not easy to do. Once you get that, now, are you set? Do you have a good job laid out for you? Well, yes and no. If you were to use this paramedic or EMT training to go into the fire department, a municipal fire department, that's a pretty good gig for most guys. I did it. I did not like it. I did not like the people that I had to work with. I didn't like the nepotism. I didn't like it's a boring job. It just wasn't for me. But a lot of guys like it. They like it. They like working 10 days a month, having all that time off. They like the excitement of it. That's fine. So if you can get into that and want to use that for your EMT, that's not a bad gig. You're going to have a living wage. You'll be cared for. You're working for the government. That's what it is. But you're also going to be forced, anything, if they ever have another COVID type of mandate, you're going to have to deal with that, and you probably lose your job if you don't toe the line. So know that going into it. The other side of it is going to be the private side. Now, I believe, at least in this area now, most ambulances that are running around are private companies. So when you have an accident, let's say that there is a heart attack in a residential place. 3 groups of people are going to show up. Your cops are going to show up. Your fire department's going to show up. They'll have medics on there as well, and they'll do patient contact. But when it comes down to the ultimate, who's ultimately in charge, that's going to be the medics on the ambulance. Now, it sounds cool, right? It sounds like a cool job running around in the ambulance with lights and sirens and having saving people's lives and stuff. But it is not a very good job. It's not. Just go talk to some people that are doing it. You're going to be sitting around either in the ambulance the majority of the time, waiting for something to happen. So sitting in a car with another person all the time is not the best thing, not the funnest thing to do. A lot of these ambulance companies have what I would call flop houses. So they'll rent some ghetto, nasty trap house, basically, for lack of a better word, where you go and hang out and watch TV in the worst part of town, and they never want to spend any money, so they'll get something really nasty for you, and people don't clean up after themselves, and the kitchens are disgusting, and so you're either in this dirty old car or you're in this nasty trap house, and you're sitting all the time, and the pay is not very good, and the work is actually, it's not what you think it is. It's not exciting. When I think about all of the times that I had to respond to medical calls, it was some 300 or 400 pound orca fat man or woman that's been bedridden for 10 years and has fallen out of their bed in a tiny little 10 by 10 room in an apartment with a queen bed in it, trying to figure out how to get this behemoth back up on their bed, down a flight of stairs without killing yourself, dealing with nonsense calls from granny who's worried about her cat or this and that. It's just not, it's not a fun job. The pay is not very, its pay is really bad. If you work for a private company, they don't treat their employees very good at all. They're just burn through people like a machine. I have never met anyone that does that work for a private company as an EMT that has liked their job. They tend to get very unhealthy themselves because they're eating out all the time. They're not getting much exercise. It is not a desirable position. So I don't know your area, Ride the Pineapple Guy, or if you're talking about fire department versus private, but I would not. If you could get into something else, I would absolutely get into something else. The only way that I would work as a paramedic would be if it was with the municipal fire department. Not my favorite job. Jezza, 4300, welcome, good to see you here. He says, Owen has been calling this Crowder thing for years. Yeah, I know Owen, he got involved with Crowder a little bit, and he is of the same mind that I am. Yeah, he has been. Yeah, actually, Owen was probably the first one that really saw Crowder for what he was. But I've watched him for a long time too, and I've always had that feeling that he's always given me the creeps, like something was not genuine there, something was off, and you got to trust your instincts. We as an adults, we just don't have a great ability to trust our instincts like we do when we were kids. You know, they always say that kids and animals, they always know a good person from a bad person. I have seen that personally. I've seen where someone would come to the door or someone will be in a crowd and automatically kids and animals just don't like them. I've seen that with my own kids, and I pay close attention to that. They're tuned in. They know something that we don't. They'll just instinctively know. You'll watch kids if you've been around them a little bit. Someone can come to the door, and if the kids run right to the door and answer it, typically they know. And they also will know if someone comes to the door and is not a good person, that they won't run to the door. And my dogs have always been the same way. So, yep, I agree. There's something about it. You should trust your instinct when something isn't right about a person. And women seem to be really clued into this as well. This is just something gives you the creeps, and there's nothing you can put your finger on it. Be careful with people like that. That's God protecting you. That's the Holy Spirit giving you some insight, as you need to trust your instinct. Mr. Michael Herr, shout out to you, super chat, 36-year-old Pennsylvania man and former mental health pro. Crowder has control and personality issues and surrounds himself with people who exacerbate those issues. His wife had enough and left the show like others. Yeah, and that's always seems to be the case with Crowder. People are starting to come out now that have worked for him in the past, and the same thing that, just spent time with him and just couldn't deal with it. Found out who he is. Yeah. Yeah. It's bad for Mr. Crowder. Mr. Tony Bologna, shout out to you. Tony's been with us for 2 months. He writes, stopping by to say hello. At a gun show right now, so much fizz. Yeah, so much fizz. Well, not so much fizz here in our state now that semi-automatics have been considered to be assault weapons, all of them. So the only thing you're going to be able to buy at a gun store is going to be a revolver or a pump-action shotgun. Unbelievable. Thank you, brother. Good to see you, Tony. Get yourself a G19X while you're there. We have a super chat from Bantha Dave. Shout out to you, Bantha. Bantha writes, is Overton Windex your producer? Love the shorts, thank you. Well, he certainly is turning into a producer. Yep, he certainly is. He's wearing a lot of hats. So I see, as we get bigger and things go on, I see him moving into a position like that. Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Bantha Dave, shout out to you. And one thing that I want to do, I mentioned this earlier, and I've got to, actually this weekend, I'm going to watch Jack. He's going to be competing, hoping to go to nationals for debate, speech and debate. So I'll have a little bit of time between rounds. So what I'm going to try to work into is what I'd really like to be able to do, what would be fun, like on today's stream, when a big issue comes up that kind of affects us or that guys are wanting to talk about, is if Overton and I can be working together in the future and he can bring these slides in or video clips, or we can do it together in a way where we can watch these together and then comment on them. I think that would be very enjoyable. We could watch the ring camera footage, stop and comment and kind of get some input and do it together. So we're working on it. You know, this started with my laptop here in the shop, and who knows where it'll go. We're going to have some growing pains, but we'll figure it out. Thank you, brother, Mr. Dave. We have a super chat from Computer Green. Shout out to you, Computer. He writes, God bless you and wish you well. What clothing brand do you recommend for a working man? Something that is high quality and tough. When I was doing excavating and going through clothing, I was kind of faced with the same problem. Wanted something that fit well, that didn't stretch out at the end of the day so bad that you have to tighten, you know, that it's falling off of you, but also wouldn't just burn. I wouldn't burn through the knees on and all that. The best value that I've ever come across, I like to wear denim, either denim or duck canvas, like a Carhartt or so. Carhartt, when I used to wear it, if it was as good as it used to be, and I got to be careful that nostalgia is kind of a funny thing. You can remember things a certain way, even though they weren't, you know, and I don't know if that's true. You know, my dad always used to say, old Coke tastes better than new Coke. Well, did it really? Or was it just his memory of it tasting good? But Carhartts, I don't recommend them because the last few that I bought, they just didn't hold up well. And I don't know if it was the weave. If you haven't wore like really good quality duck canvas or denim, it reacts very differently than the cheap stuff. Levi's, Wranglers, pretty cheap denim. Carhartt, they've done something. It does not wear like it used to. Like, for example, I used to be able to put a pair of Carhartts on in the morning, go work 12 hours, and at the end of the day, they still felt like they were fitting. They fit and moved with me good, and they didn't just stretch out. After the last few that I bought, man, after a couple hours and sitting in them, it's like the pants have grown 3 sizes. They're like sagging in the back, and they're hanging, and it feels like just really messy and sloppy. Like it doesn't fit me properly. It doesn't fit nowhere near like it did when I put them on. They just stretched out really bad. The other thing is they faded, and they became threadbare. Like a lot of holes in them, and threads coming loose and stitching coming loose. I never had that problem earlier back in the days. So I started looking for something different. And there used to be a clothing store, Union Clothing they called it, and it was just for the working man. I used to love going there. As you could go there and they had really good boots. You could buy Westco and white boots. They had, that was the first time I ever saw Filson. It's the first time I ever bought Filson tin pants. And they had, one brand that they had there was Key, K-E-Y. Key has been making denim for a long time. It's popular with farmers, the overalls. The logo is pretty iconic. I think it's green with the K-E-Y. And the last time I was there, last time I was at the logging shop down the road from here, they still carry those. They were really popular with the loggers and have been for a long time. And I don't know what they cost now, but maybe 10 years ago, you could buy a pair of Key jeans for about just under $30, $26, $27, $28. And I wore those for a long time, Key jeans and Key overalls. And they wore like iron. They really were tough, and they were really affordable, and they fit good. And they didn't seem to stretch out near as bad and become threadbare, nowhere near like a Carhartt did. So I would look into that and see if that fits you and works for you. Just search for Key denim, Key. The sizing I found to be pretty comparable with Carhartt. So if you wear a 36, 34, or 34, 34, you'll probably be pretty safe with that. But I would go with the Key denim, try it out and see what you think. Very affordable, good quality stuff. To get proper denim, like dungarees, denim the way it was made in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in America at the height of it, denim that would last you your whole life, you got to pay a lot of money for that. There's only a few companies that are making that, and they're primarily in Japan. I don't know of any US companies that are doing like the original dungaree high quality denim, like 21 ounce, 18 ounce denim. That's what I wear, except for the Japanese. The Japanese are able to do it because they've bought and refurbished the old looms that companies like Levi and that made dungarees, workwear the best they could be, where a guy would pay a little bit more up front, but it was something that he would have for a long time, is hard to come by, and you have to pay a lot for it because it's all done the old way. It's not high production. So it's available out there, but you have to pay a lot for it. But for affordable, go with Key and report back. Tell me what you think. We have a super chat from Computer Green. Shout out to you. Computer writes, God bless you and wish you well. What clothing? Oh, I already read that. Sorry. General Buck Tuckinson, new member. Welcome. Very happy to have you here. And Mr. Chris Hall, member for 2 months. Shout out to you, Chris. Sure appreciate you here as well. Chris writes, what is your opinion on Knipex versus Snap-on for handheld tools? I would say quality-wise, they're one in the same. Probably on equal quality. But price-wise, Knipex are, man, they're quite a bit less money. All things being equivalent. Probably about half, maybe 40% of what Snap-on is. As good as, well, I've even seen on the last Snap-on truck I was on, they sell Knipex on the Snap-on trucks. I've seen 2 trucks that sell them, the Cobra pliers specifically. Why? Because they're the best thing out there. If Snap-on had their own plier that was equivalent to the Cobra plier, they would be selling their own. And so I would put them on equal value. I know for me, just, you know, there's also perception. One thing that's lost on, sometimes you just like something because you like it, because it gives you the fizz. I have Snap-on tools. I know probably 75%, 80% of my tools in my main box are probably Snap-on tools. And then another 4 or 5% are probably Knipex. And then the rest of them are a mix of things I got for my granddad. I've got Craftsman and Proto and Mac and S&K, Plum. I think you even have an old Plum tool. So good tools, good American tools, but not to be, you know, certainly not on the level of Snap-on. I can tell you personally about those 2 brands. When I pull out my plier drawer and I see my row of pliers and cutters and all of that, the Knipex gives me the same fizz as the Snap-on does. And none of the other tools do that. Mac, Proto, S&K, any of those. So if that tells you anything, I use those more than about anything. If I was going to grab one tool to go deal with a problem that I don't know what it is or a potential problem, what am I going to grab? Like if I have to just I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen and I'm going to need to pinch or grab or twist or pull on something and I need to get something done, I grab 3 tools. The 3 tools, I'll grab them right now. Let me show you what I grab. Number 1 I'm going to grab is going to be a pair of Cobra pliers over all my Snap-on stuff. Number 2 is going to be a big old hammer. And number 3 is going to be a crescent wrench. Yeah, It's funny. I do this all the time. Like I'll pull up. So we're gonna go. Let's say we're gonna go down and work on this or that or do something. I know there's going to be a problem. If it's got wheels or an engine on it, it's eventually going to give you trouble. So I don't have to come back to the shop and deal with it. These are the three things that I always grab right here. Knipex Cobras, a big hammer, a big ball peen for driving stuff and moving stuff and fixing stuff that bent, and a crescent wrench. That's real. Those, I mean, honestly, when no one's watching and I'm not overthinking anything, and I want to grab the three tools that are going to give me the maximum ability to fix and repair. Those are the three things that I grab every single time. And a shovel. Thank you, brother. Yeah, they're both good. You can't go wrong with Knipex. I would, even if your whole plier set, they have a pretty good broad range of tools. They're not going to, I don't think that they get into sockets and screwdrivers and that sort of thing. They're usually pinching, cutting, gripping tools, but they're excellent. Maybe, I would say they're on par with Snap-on. I think they're just as good. Mr. Caleb M., new member. Welcome, brother. Shout out to you. And Zachary Babb. Thank you, Zachary. And Mr. Overton says, holds out styrofoam cup will produce 4 ammo. Indeed. Holds out the tin cup. And our newest member, Mr. Mike Black. Shout out to you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for being here. Goodness. Gentlemen, I am very, very keen, before it gets any later, to get out there and start burning that fence line. So I am going to shut off a little bit early today. I'm going to be taking my stuff out there. Those of you who are members or would like to participate on there, hang out. I'll send you out a notification, but you'll get to do it with me. We'll get the drip torch out there and go do that. I'm reluctant to go too much longer here because I don't want to, in case I have any trouble there, I don't want to get out there and be out there in the dark dealing with that. So I am going to shut it down, and we will be moving out there. Hope to see members over there, and yes. That's what we're going to do. May God bless you and your families. Please keep us in your prayers. We sure do appreciate all the super chats. We appreciate very much Mr. Overton, as well as the middlemen that have been helping. We couldn't do this without them. So thank you very much. We'll see you over there.